Hello everyone, this is Caleb Simpson, and you are watching my walkthrough for Chrono Trigger for Nintendo DS. In this video, I'm going to be talking about various techs and dual techs, explaining some of the principles about how to abuse the gameplay mechanics and get the most out of your characters, do the most damage possible, and that's what this whole video is all about. Now to that end, I'm going to start off this video anyways by showing Spekkio's 5th form, which is one of the harder ones. Now this form is available between levels 40 and 98, and all my characters are currently in the 47 to 49 range, which gives them just enough stats to survive his initial attacks, meaning that this fight should be somewhat challenging fight for my level range, but I'm going to show you how you can just pulverize him if you have the appropriate strategies. So I'm going to be using Ayla and Luca. However, I'm going to be using Ayla's power/strength stat, which is unusual, and that's actually the exact opposite of what you usually want to do with Spekio, but I want to explain a principle real quick. So first I'm going to throw the prismatic spectacles on Ayla, which will boost her damage of her magic and her power. I'm actually going to be using her strength stat for this. And then otherwise on Luca, I'm going to be using, I ideally would use the prism specs, but that's unlikely that you have multiple. I have multiple because I won them in the arena pages. So I'm going to put the sunglasses on Luca to boost her damage just a little bit. That boosts it by 20%. Prism specs boost it by 50%. So then meanwhile, I'm going to put the prismatic dress on both these girls. I have two again from the arena of ages. That will cut magic damage taken by 1/3. Now for Robo, I can wear either colored plates and stuff. Now in this particular case, he's almost maxed out his magic defense. So instead, I'm going to wear the Moonbeam armor and also put an accessory on that will reduce his I want to increase his magic stat to increase his healing, and also I want to increase his magic defense. So I'm going to go ahead and throw on, I can either put on the barrier ring or Flea's bustier. Otherwise, I'm actually going to put on the magic crest, which is an item that you get in the Lost Sanctum, but I want it in the Arena of Ages. So I'm going to throw that on real quick because it'll do both magic defense and magic to increase his healing. Now, normally for Spekkio, you want to do pure magic damage because he's very resistant to physical damage. However, how the defense works in this game is I think it blocks it by a flat percentage or a flat amount. So once you get past that threshold, you do even more damage. So even though I'm going to use an ability that's not typical for this fight, it actually ends up being really, really good. It's because of Ayla's strength stat is why this ends up working. So my big plan with Robo is just keep using Healing Beam over and over again. I have pumped some magic tabs into Robo, and as a result, this has kind of pushed it over the edge, made it a little bit nicer. It heals not quite half of everybody's HP, but it's pretty good. So that should keep everybody topped off as long as I just keep doing that. And if it comes down to it, I can also use just a single Cure Beam as well to heal a single person a little bit more as well. But Robo is actually pretty fast now. Because I'm doing this after Robo's Genodome side quest, it means that he is one of my fastest characters now. He has 15 speed just by himself, which is pretty darn good. So because of that, he can keep up with Spekkio pretty well. So as long as one of your characters is able to heal every time that Spekkio attacks, you should be able to keep up with it pretty well, and Robo's a great choice for this. Now as far as Ayla and Luca go, now one of the weird things to know about this is Spekkio has high physical resistance, right? So he doesn't take very much damage from physical. However, and that's what Flame Kick is actually, it's Ayla physical and Luca magic damage. So he would take more damage from pure magic abilities, generally speaking. However, because Ayla has such high power/strength stat, and I gave her the prismatic spectacles, it means that she's doing way more damage. And even though Spekkio is blocking the physical portion of Ayla's attack, what's happening is because her damage is so high, she's getting over that threshold. I think how defenses work in this game is it seems what it feels like to me is that it's thresholds, or it blocks a flat amount. So if he's blocking up to 800 physical damage, or 1,000, say he's blocking 1,000 damage, doesn't matter. But so if I'm doing 5,000 or 6,000 damage, it's only reducing it by 1,000. So that's still more than using a pure magical damage attack that would only do 3,000 total. Does that make sense? So because I'm doing 5,000 or 6,000 minus 1,000 is still more than just 3,000 is why. So that's why that attack did so good. So there's some ways you can kind of work the system a little bit in your benefit. And I'll explain more about that later on in this video. Alright, so for the rest of this video, we're going to be doing something totally different than I usually do. You can tell things are getting extra spicy once they start whipping out the Excel spreadsheets. Oh, yeah. So if you want to spread your nerdy wings with me, dive into some of the math behind some of the techs, you can hang out for the rest of this video. If that sounds interesting to you, I'm going to be comparing what is definitively the best dual techs for combat, for boss battles, etc. What is the best healing abilities? Who is the best healer? And also, which is the best character? If you're going to be feeding capsules/tabs to your characters, who are the best characters to feed them to? do some benefit from the capsules/tabs more than other characters. So if you are going to throw them all in one character, who is the best character to do that with? So those are the kinds of questions I'm going to be answering, and like who is the best for various situations, early game, mid game, and also late game. That's the kind of stuff I'm going to be talking about. So if that's all sounds interesting for you, then stick around and I'll give you some tips for your next playthrough of the game or whatever. It's all kind of fascinating. If that all sounds incredibly boring or you're not interested, then skip ahead to the next video where I will move on to some of the side quests before we move on to the main quest and finally tackle Lavos at long last. So that's what's going to be happening in this particular video. So just some disclaimers before we dive in is I started this project like trying to figure out, like just answering the question, like are some of these techs, like are they really lopsided? Because it felt like some abilities were just bad, just really bad. And then other abilities were super awesome. And I was like, is this in my imagination or is this actually how it is? It turns out, yes, that's exactly how it is. It's not super balanced. Some of it actually is relatively balanced. It doesn't really matter. But some combinations are just terrible. So that all being said, I was surprised at my findings. I was surprised to find that that's true. So at first it felt really, really important. But then as the walkthrough has progressed and I started using the abilities more and stuff like that, I started finding some interesting combinations I didn't expect. And in the end, I ended up, like, part of what I was trying to figure out is, are some characters bad? Like, you just don't want to use them. And I ended up deciding that all of the characters are useful in different situations. Now, I do think that some characters are better to feed various capsules/tabs to. However, all of the characters are useful in different situations, and they're all viable, and they're all good. So, I don't know, except for Magus. Magus is kind of terrible in most situations. There are times, well, that's not entirely true. There are times at the end of the game when he's good, but yeah, anyways. That all being said, I did all this research and I felt like when I first started doing it that it was really important. I was like, wow, I'm surprised at these findings. And then as the game progressed, I started being like, you know, it doesn't really matter much in the end. So just a quick disclaimer before we dive in. That's one of the things that I found. So here is how I came about all this. First of all, I did find a forum post by this dude that helped me a lot. I used this to help make this spreadsheet. He was asking the question, so this is on Chrono Compendium, but this bro made a post here. He was talking about how he found this guide on GameFAQs where people had dived in and found the formulas for various abilities. Some of them are a little bit weird because they do things like this a lot, where it's like the character level plus a particular stat, then that number combined times a specific number equals the damage that the enemies actually receive. That's actually a very simple formula. Some of them get way more complicated than that, and they're all over the place. Some of them are, and also to know, like some of your damage for your dudes especially is like weapon damage plus your strength/power equal, and then a complicated formula after that equals your attack. And then so it's based on your attack your attack is in the formula as opposed to just your strength/power stat, which that greatly affects things because that means it's super dependent on your weapon while other abilities are not. That's why the Crisis Arm, for example, is really good with some abilities and not with others. Anyways, so that's what was going on here. Quick disclaimer too is, so I'm going to have a link to these guides, or this one in particular, in the description. This is made by Dragon Knight Zero and G Paladin. So this guy started it out and then he moved on to other projects. This guy took it over after that. I can't get in contact with either one of them. I tried to email this guy too. This email no longer works. Like, this was done back in 2002, which makes me feel old. Yay! So anyway, I tried to give credit to these guys, and they requested that we get permission and stuff before we use it and stuff, but I did all the things I could do, and it's out there, and it's many years ago and stuff, so I feel like it's fine that I'm showing this in my YouTube video, whatever. I'm giving them credit, like, come on. And I'm redirecting you to use their guide. It's a useful resource. So anyways, they have all these formulas for all the different single techs and dual techs in the game. They don't have any techs or any formulas for the triple techs, though. So anyways, this guy he played through the game, did not use any capsules or tabs, and he just made observations. So he has observations of the different techs saying which ones are good, which ones are bad, and then he has a list of the damage numbers that he was getting on average-ish, and he kind of rounded it to the nearest 100. So he was explaining why some abilities are super good, and he was also making comments about some of them being more mana efficient than others, so he just like highlighted the ones in particular that he thought were awesome. I decided to take it a little step further though, so I just took his damage numbers, and I made an Excel spreadsheet, and so I just have his numbers plugged in here, just so that I don't have to play through the whole game and without using tabs and stuff, just to do an experiment, you know. I didn't want to do that. So he's not doing all the crappy ones, you know? He's only showing the good ones. So, what is the damage numbers total at max level-ish? Or not max, but, you know, and when you get to the Black Omen, on average. And then, what is the MP cost, and what is the damage per mana damage per mana, so how mana efficient are they? So what it is, I made a chart in here, that's what's going on here for all these things. So, That all being said, I put them into categories based on element and stuff too. There's actually a lot of physical. One thing that's weird about these is a lot of these are actually technically both. Like, for example, I don't even have it in here, but Fire Whirl, not to be confused with Inferno Fire Whirl, but the regular one between Chrono and Luca, for example, it's half. I guess I can't even show that. Blah, 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 blah. So Chrono, Luca. So here we go. Fire Whirl. So here's what I was talking about. It's Chrono's attack, which means his weapon damage plus his strength/power stat equals his attack power. It's more complicated than that. So his attack damage, his attack stat in his character sheet, times 2.5 is physical. So that portion of the attack is physical. The other portion is magical. It's all fire elements, so if an enemy is resistant to fire or they're more vulnerable to fire, then the whole skill does a % more damage. However, a percentage of that damage is still, even though it's fire element, is still physical, if that makes sense. So some of it's magical, some of it's physical, all of it is fire, which is a confusing concept. But anyways, just know that some attacks are, a lot of dual techs are both physical and magical, even though they're a particular element, which is a weird thing to wrap your mind around. So, that all being said, I don't have all of the abilities listed because I'm only showing the good ones, and all the bad ones I'm just not showing. You get towards the end game, it's kind of like you're only using the big ones anyways. That all being said, there's only a few that are straight up magical. This says it's physical. I actually don't think that's true. I think it's straight up magic. Now, unfortunately, trying to grab the actual, like, stats for this is a little bit awkward. I can do that for healing really easily, because the formulas for those are very simple, and I actually have, it's just based off just the magic stats, so it's super easy to do for these formulas. I can just change these, like, for example, how efficient would Aura be if I were to give her 20 magic tabs? Boom, I can just change the number here, and then bam, it changes it in my formula, which is sweet, because I have it all. I have formulas in here with Excel, which is super simple. Nothing too complicated there. But for damage, it gets way more complicated, so I don't really have the flexibility of being able to just change some numbers and see the difference. What I can do for you, though, is I can show you how efficient it is if I were to change, like this, for example. So if Chrono has the gold stud on, you know, it would only cost 5 MP because it's 1/4, and then boom, suddenly it's more efficient, which is cool. That's neat. More so, what I think is interesting, I would say, like, one of the things I think is cool about a chart like this is to be able to look down it and see, like, for example, Antipode Bomb 3. I think overall you're better off putting a gold stud on Luca and then, like, a silver stud on Marl, for example. You can do this all day, because that's a pretty decent ability. But I think that is overall more efficient. Like, even though Twister, for example, does more damage, one of the things that I found is that a lot of the triple techs don't actually do that much damage. Like, look at this. Antipode Bomb does 2100 damage, right? This does only 200 more damage, but it costs an entire another character, and the total MP cost of this is 18. Meanwhile, the total cost of this is 28. So it costs more MP, and yeah, anyways, this is more mana efficient total. However, if you put this on her, now all of a sudden the damage per mana is actually very similar. You see what I mean? But here's the thing. Here's the really crazy thing, though. If you're using Antipode Bomb 3, that means we're doing very similar damage and very similar mana efficiency if you put that item on her. And then meanwhile, you have a whole other character who's freed up to do whatever you want. So you can have Robo doing the Crisis Arm and being like, bam, and doing 3,000 damage or whatever. You know, it's super great. And then you're doing a total of 5,000, no problem. And yeah, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, as opposed to just doing a triple tech like this, like, sure, it's more MP efficient, kind of, but, like, does it really matter? Like, so some techs just aren't as good. Generally speaking, a dual tech plus a single tech is better than a triple tech, is one of the things that I found. See, same thing here. Blaze Kick was a single target one versus Fire Zone. Limited range, but it does, like, this does more damage, but who cares, kind of. It's, again, if you were to give her a gold stud, it's like, the mana efficiency is similar, if not better. I mean, you can do the same thing here and do, like, this. But is it really, you don't really get as much benefit of it because the initial cost isn't as good. So what I found is, I feel like overall, the best techs are I like the ones where it's really lopsided with one character, where one character is really expensive. So like Antipode Bomb 3 is a great example of that, because you can get a lot of damage for very little effort, if that makes sense. So Fire Sword 2, for example, I don't feel like is very, it's not actually single enemy. Fire Sword 2 anyways is actually enemies in a small area. But well, limited area. I don't know. Whatever. Some of these need to be updated, but you get the idea. The one in particular that's kind of nuts, which this doesn't show it here on the damage chart, but I've talked about this before, is that increasing some character-specific stats are really, really good. One of the things I did is I made a summarization of some of that guy's notes that were on that forum post, so I was talking here about some of the formulas a little bit. Not really too much in here for the damage, though. But, so let's see, going down. So physical, a lot of these are typically a single enemy, And I feel like one of the best ones that I found in here was actually Dropkick, otherwise known as... it was Dropkick, otherwise known as Drop Something in the DS version. I can't remember what it's called right now. Whatever. These are all the Super Nintendo version names over here. But anyways, this is a really good ability. Super, super good. I was actually really surprised by that. Beast Toss is amazing. Not all bosses you can use it against them, but this is really good, especially against... especially if he's using the Crisis Arm. If you give Robo the Crisis Arm, this ability becomes so disgusting, so good. But this is... I would not underestimate this ability either. And again, like I was saying before, if you give her, you know, this versus him having that, I guess. So Gold Stud, bam, bam. This is still more efficient. But Dropkick isn't bad either. One of the nice things about this, like, it just kind of depends. One of the nice things about this combination is because you can also use, whatever it's called, Slurp Kiss as a healing ability, which is really good. I'll talk more about that here in a bit. One interesting thing to know is that Poyoza Dance is neutral damage, so you can use it on enemies that are normally resistant to lots of different things, and that works pretty good too. I feel like overall the other triple techs that you get using specific items the accessories are not very good. Again, like, if you're going to be tossing a stud on them to reduce the mana cost, it doesn't really feel like it's as good. I was just curious, like, again, I'm focusing on MP cost because that's what I can offer here. But, yeah, I don't know. So I'm going to show this whole list. You can just pause the video and look through all these. I'll show here's all the way to the top, and then I'll stall here for a second so you can pause the video and look at the numbers, and then here's the rest of them. So these are all the better ones, generally speaking, and I feel like, you know, generally speaking, my feeling about it overall now is that, like, having a bunch of really hard-hitting, high-cost spells that are dual techs is, like, the best overall in the game. If you can hit the whole screen and do tons and tons of damage for very little mana cost, it just is so good. Even against bosses, it doesn't matter. I think one of the best spells overall that I was really surprised by was Inferno. Inferno and Dropkick were the two that really surprised me. And I'm actually surprised, like, that Triple Attack is pretty good. I think one of the best ones actually is going to be 3D Attack. Like, you'll notice that, like, Ayla is just good in all of these. She's just disgusting how good she is. So, like, 300, it gets up to 300. That's amazing. Like, very few abilities got up to 300 efficiency, 300 damage per mana. This is really high. So these three characters, Chrono is really good for all kinds of different stuff. He has Frenzy / Confuse as well for single target if he needs to. He also has Luminaire, so if you want to do some pretty good lightning damage or you need some magic damage, he can do that. But otherwise, he can do some really good single target for bosses. And then meanwhile, so, like, you know, the reason I say that is you can use this when you're attacking, just hit him real hard, and then you can have these two switch to healing real quick with Slurp Kiss, and then have Chrono continue with single target either as Luminaire or Frenzy / Confuse. So, like, that's a pretty nice team composition, for example. I just find that Ayla, I always liked Ayla. She's just so useful. She takes on the elemental affinity of whoever she's with, so you just, as long as you team her up with somebody who's good against that particular boss, or whatever, then she just pounds him. She does so good. She tends to focus on physical damage, though, but a lot of times I find that enemies that are resistant to physical, it doesn't even matter. Like, sometimes it's like it reduces the damage they take from physical by 25%, but the damage numbers on it is so high comparatively that it doesn't matter. Like, okay, sure, I could be using Delta Storm, but woo, like, why would I do that when I can use a different triple tech and do almost double the damage? You see what I mean? Like, it just is better. One of the ones that surprised me, I don't even have it in here, is... Oh, yeah, maybe I do. Triple Raid. Triple Raid, funnily enough, this does really... You know, it's really cheap, and the total damage isn't super, super high, but at the same time, it's really good. Like, you look at Falcon Hit, for example. Falcon Hit is very efficient. The more enemies you have, the better. Triple Raid is single target only. Oops. Triple Raid is single enemy, but... oh, totally... Triple Raid is single enemy, but it's it's very efficient. So even late into the game. So if you're not planning on using a gold stud on characters, it's a really good option. I feel like the damage is just kind of, it's decent. It's not, it's really good for the amount of mana you're spending. As far as the total damage it does, it's just okay. Like, you know, Falcon Hit, for example, is better for multi-target, is what it's intended for. Max Cyclone is terrible. Terrible ability. It's so specific and you just can't use it hardly at all. But yes, Beast Toss is an amazing ability. Now, a quick disclaimer before I move on is that something to know about all of these abilities that I'm talking about is that this is not showing the stat difference. This is all just base game, like, not max level, and this is like end game but not max level, and then your stats are not maxed out at all, and no capsules / tabs. And capsules tabs will like totally change these things. Like this ability, here's like one of the things I want to point out is like Inferno is not terrible damage already, but here's the thing, like if you give her a whole bunch of tabs, it can very easily go up to something like this. And then all of a sudden it's very efficient. So it's really, really good because it scales so well with her magic stat. So it's very easy for this ability to get really nuts. And the cost of it actually isn't that bad, but you can totally just give her some tabs as well. Likewise, this one's a little bit weird because it scales with her power. So this one scales with her power, this one scales with her magic. So it's a little bit weird depending on which thing you're focusing on. Now, what I found, so similarly, I want to point out the fact that, like, Robo and Frog are a little bit weird. Robo's magic stat is terrible, absolutely terrible. So is Chrono's magic stat as well. So, but if you give him a bunch of magic stats, then it's really, really good. This chart doesn't really reflect that very well, but, like, the reason this damage is just kind of okay and is not very efficient is that you don't have a lot of magic tabs on Chrono. So if we go, like this, Luminaire... Boom. So it's 20 times 0.8, and I want to compare that with Dark Matter, for example. So this is Chrono's max level ability, you know, lightning explosion thing. Meanwhile, Magus, Dark Matter, is 15.5. This has a lower multiplier, but he starts out with more magic stat than Chrono does. So just to show that formula again, Luminaire is the same thing, level plus magic. So if you give him a bunch of magic stat, because his magic stat is terrible starting out. Like, let's, in fact, we can go back here. So go to... healing. I don't actually have Magus's healing magic stat right now. It's probably a 50 or something, 52. I don't know off the top of my head, but let's say, so Chrono's 22 magic, right? So if it's level plus magic, right? And if you give him similar, if Chrono has similar magic stat to Magus, if you were to give him 30 magic tabs, which I know is a ton. If you give Chrono tons of magic tabs, remember it's level plus magic, so it is going to be a little bit different. But let's just say, I mean, I don't think it's unreasonable to say it's at least 2,000, right? At least. But then if you do something like this, too. I mean, look at that. 400% efficiency? That's really high. And something else to know about that is, like, at endgame, when Chrono's maxed out on magic, when he has 99 magic, then Luminaire is amazing. It's a really good ability at the very end. If you were to, like, level like crazy, or just pump a ton of magic tabs into him. Part of the reason why I point that out is because you can farm for magic tabs in the Black Omen, so you can get a whole bunch of them. So as far as deciding who to give tabs to, what have I found? A couple things to note is Frog. A lot of Frog's abilities are kind of bad. His stats tend to focus on magic, like for example, let's say Bubble Hit. Let's look at that in here real quick. Bubble Hit. Oh, see, Bubble Hit, this is a great example, too. Not all of these ones are just off of multiple characters. This one is purely based off of Ayla's attack damage. And her damage, by the way, is a little bit strange because her weapon gets better as she levels up, too. That's actually relevant for Tex, I guess I shouldn't talk about that. Her weapon is different. It does different things, so special things the higher level she is, but that's irrelevant for Tex, so I shouldn't talk about that right now. Anyways, so the multiplier in this, though, is very low compared to some other dual techs. Like, again, like, you know, looking at Inferno is 28 times her magic stat. Meanwhile, this is only 10 times her attack stat. So it's very small comparatively. Alright, so let's talk about healing. So there's a bunch of different characters you can use for that. One quick comment about these guys. As far as heal with Frog versus heal beam with Robo. So those are the two heals that heal the whole party that are single techs. Now, as far as those go, the problem with Frogs is that his multiplier is really low. So it's 6.5 times his magic stat. This is his magic stat at 43, which is like roughly when you're going to get to Black Omen, like minimum level, kind of. So then, meanwhile, Robo, it scales a lot better. So, like, you can see that, yes, like, Frogs is more efficient, defaultly. However, if you just add just hardly any. So if you give 10 tabs to each one of these characters, so I have 34 on Robo and 37 on Frog, and all of a sudden this only heals 240, and this heals 340. Like, yes, it's still more efficient, but he's healing more. Robo catches up very quickly, and he's healing a lot better. Like, even this, like you say, Aura Whirl, right? So if you give 10 magic tabs to Marl, like, it only heals 300. It's still, like, kind of not very good. Meanwhile, Robo's, like, catching up to... You get to a certain point, like, mid-game and onwards, where you need to start having some really good healing to, like, stay alive. I feel like Robo is overall one of the best ones. He's kind of slow, though, but you give him some speed tabs and you can, or a speed ring, and you can take care of that right away. But for just 3 MP, that's not that bad, actually. So it's pretty mana efficient for... I mean, here's the thing. Like, yes, this is more efficient, but it just doesn't hit hard enough to actually make it worthwhile. So, I don't know. I would say that overall, Robo's the best as far as a single tech for healing. Now, as far as dual techs for healing, though, and this is what I was talking about here, I was comparing this as well for a moment there. A lot of these, like, ones that are cure ones, they're very expensive, so they cost like 10 MP total for this. Technically, it doesn't heal max. What it does is it heals over 1,000, but you're capped out at 999 anyways, so whatever. It accomplishes the same thing. But between these all, Robo and Marl's is a little bit more efficient because it only costs 3 MP for Robo. Meanwhile, it costs 5 for both of these guys, so it just costs more. Just more expensive for the exact same thing. It doesn't really matter. But these other dual techs don't scale very well. The thing is, Marl is a really good single target healer, but more so by herself. Her efficient skill is just regular Star Cure. It's really, really good. Cure 2 is okay, it costs 5, it's kind of expensive, but Cure 2 is great because you give her just even a little bit of magic and it already heals. It's like, so there, you give her 10 magic tabs there and boom, now all of a sudden she's healing not quite 999 already, but it's already really, really good. But by the time she's like level 50 or something like that, you give her a little bit of magic tabs, she's good to go. Or you just feed her a bunch early. If you were to feed her like all the ones you find, or whatever, you can easily get her up to healing somebody completely. The reason I point that out, the reason that's interesting is because imagine if Marl is just using Star Cure every single turn. She's hasted, and she's using Star Cure every single turn. She's just like bam, 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 healing everybody for 999 all the time by herself. That's pretty good. Like, honestly, that's great. I mean, you could do the same thing with Cure 2, but it's just crazy. For 2 MP, you can heal somebody like really, really good is nuts. So as far as a single target healer, I still feel like Marl is overall the best. Because she just has other utility and stuff she can do too. Some of her dual techs are pretty good in the damage tree, and I'll talk more about those later, but other abilities that are cool. The most crazy one in here by far is going to be Slurp Kiss. This one, by the way, all the healing abilities are a multiplier based off of a single character's magic stat. So she starts out with like really bad magic stat. It's awful, but it's actually super efficient. She has really high multipliers for all these. I give her 10, and it's like, look at how crazy that healing is. Like 368, that's really good. Like, I don't know. I mean, for a 1 MP cost skill, like that's nuts. So if you give her some more, like if you farm it for a little while and just throw 30 of them on her, then look what happens. Like, it's already really good. One of the interesting things about this that I think a lot of people forget is the fact that Kiss removes negative status effects too, which that's so it can remove like chaos debuff and stuff like that. So rather than using a panacea / heal, if you have Ayla in your party, you can just have her use the Kiss ability, which is something I think a lot of people forget. So like something you can do is you can have like a Vigilant Helm, for example, on Ayla to give her status immunity, or like Shala's Amulet, and then just use Kiss to remove debuffs off other characters, and it gives them a little bit of healing anyways. But even just a little bit of magic tabs on her, it makes it pretty good. Like that's like almost half their HP at max level, which, I mean, honestly, and here's another thing too, just look at it this way too. 10 magic tabs on Ayla at the beginning of the game, as soon as she's actually unlocked more like mid-game, but you do that already, and at that point you have like maybe 600 HP max, but just 10 magic tabs, that's all it takes, and she's already like healing over half their HP at least with every single 1 MP Kiss, and she's one of the fastest characters in the game. So like, it's just, I don't know, it's really good. So it's the amount of benefit you get out of just a little bit of effort with her is way higher than all these other characters. Like I was showing, like, to make their numbers really good with a lot of the other characters, like 20 magic tabs or more, and she's already really good. The other ability with her that's super nasty, that's really, really good, is Slurp Kiss. This is a really good ability. So look at this. It heals with just 10 MP on Ayla. This scales only with Ayla's magic stat, not Frog's, and it's 28 times her magic, which means she heals really, really good with very little effort. It only costs 1 MP for both of them, so it's the cheapest, best healing in the game. It's really fast between Frog and Ayla. So one of the things that's cool with them is they have like drop down, otherwise known as Dropkick, which is a really good single target physical tech, and then they can do that for damage, and then they can just switch to using Slurp Kiss back and forth, and it's just really strong. So it heals 700 or just already, but if you give her just a little bit more, at 35, she will already, it's 999 is the max. So basically she's full healing already with 20 magic tabs at level 43, which that's kind of like minimum low level. So basically if you toss all of your magic tabs in Ayla, she can heal really, really good. But also another crazy one too is that Inferno, wherever that is, Inferno will do really, really good damage. I'm not actually sure how much it is. It's probably at least somewhere in there, but it's pretty darn efficient. And you can be like, boop, or something, and it's just it's a really good ability by giving her a magic gold stud, whatever. But yeah, really good ability. You can toss back and forth. Other things about healing, I don't really feel like any of the other ones are super worth mentioning. So a lot of these like cure abilities are good, but as long as you get enough magic stat on some of these other characters, you can full party heal pretty easily. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. I do think that Kiss, like the more magic tabs that she gets, the nastier this gets. It just gets really out of control. It gets really, really good. Eventually Kiss will heal everybody completely, which is nuts for the amount of MP she's spending. So like all of her MP can be dedicated towards damage, and just occasionally she throws out a heal. She's just like, whoa, and just like, boosh, you're just full heal. It's so good. But yeah, I would say like I feel like mid-game, Frog is an amazing healer. It's sort of weird. Frog is a great healer by himself, but he can whip out a cure if he needs to. Cure 2 is really good. So, I don't know. Regular star heal is amazing mid-game. Late game, it's just kind of awful. But if you give him, like, eventually, you know, he gets... It's okay. By the end of the game, though, it's not, like... It's still not keeping up. Meanwhile, everybody else is, like... Yeah, I mean, Robo at max level, it's fine. You know, he's healing everybody for days, which is crazy. Robo by himself can full heal everybody by himself for 3 mana, which is nothing. So, like, I don't know. If you farm them like crazy, so it kind of depends. Like, when you get towards the Black Omen, if you want to farm them, you can totally make some of your characters really gross. It's kind of nuts. So as far as who's the best healer overall, I feel like single target is probably going to be Marl. Frog is a pretty decent single target healer because he has access to cure. It is kind of expensive, though. But regular star cure is amazing efficiency. As far as full party heals, I feel like Robo is overall the best for a single tech. Is amazing. He's super good. You give him some speed, he's great. He can just do that all day long. And then meanwhile, Ayla and Frog is a really powerful combination for healing as well. But yeah, so all the characters are good in different situations is kind of what I ended up deciding. As far as who is the best person to put magic capsules on, what is my recommendation? I would say, for healing purposes, I would say Robo or Ayla by far. The other characters don't really benefit. Well, here's the other thing. Marl is great early game. It just pushes her cure over the edge, and I think it's really good. Frog doesn't really benefit from it so much, so I would leave his magic stat alone for the most part. It doesn't really matter too much. In my walkthrough, I actually did put a little bit on all my lowest characters. Part of the reason why I was doing that was because I went to the Arena of Ages and I got a bunch of extra ones, so I figured I didn't want to just toss like way more magic capsules on my characters than you guys had access to. I just felt like that would be kind of mean, or like I didn't want you guys to be watching my gameplay and being like, well, I can't do that. Like I wanted to walk through to show me how to actually play the game, not like, by the way, I'm cheating, yeah, you know what I mean? I didn't want you guys to feel like it was unfair, so I wanted like what you saw on screen to actually be attainable for those of you who didn't have access to the Arena of Ages. So I spread out my tabs on all my characters a little bit more, is why I did that. Alright, so that all being said, who is the definitive best healer? Like, both as far as like early game, mid game, and late game, and also like super late game when you start maxing everybody's stats out. Who is the best healer in each one of those situations? I'm just going to talk about each one of them in succession, whenever I talk about them. So Marl, her best ability by far is Cure. It scales really well, and it kind of makes Cure 2 obsolete once you get her enough magic, once she's high enough level. But it takes a little while to get to that point. But overall, I don't really feel like it's super worthwhile to give her magic tabs just in general, because if you're going to give it to her, I feel like it's nice early game because she's your dedicated healer and she's awesome. And it makes Aura pretty good. But other than that, I feel like, generally speaking, a lot of the other characters get way more benefit out of their magic stat. Her dual techs are pretty bad. Like, Aura Whirl is just not good. It's good for supplemental healing, but it's not, you don't want to rely on it because it's just not very efficient. The multiplier on it is just terrible. And same thing with Aura Beam is just bad. It's just a really bad ability. However, Cure Wind and Double Cure are, like, pretty good. Like, I don't think they're very efficient. I don't think you should rely on them all the time. However, they're a good oh crap button, you know? Like, you're like, oh no. So if she's using Cure for 2 mana all the time, and then she just occasionally uses a Double Cure, like, that's okay. Like, that's fine. She has enough mana to support that. She's pretty mana efficient without most of her abilities anyways, so, like, she has the MP to spare to throw out a couple of these here and there. So I feel like she's good combined with either Frog or Robo. So if she's on the same team as them, it's pretty nice. Now, as far as other characters, you know, Frog, I would say he's not worth putting any magic tabs on. His magic tabs are just bad. He doesn't scale with these very good at all. Like, the only one that scales good is Cure 2, but you have to give him a whole bunch. Like, here's the thing. Like, Cure 2 with Marl will already full heal somebody at the very beginning. As soon as she gains access to it, she's already healing everybody over max. And then meanwhile, Frog can't even come close, and you have to give him a whole ton of magic tabs to even come close to even doing that, just to even get to the point where his Cure 2 is even healing somebody completely, and it's expensive. But at least he has an ability that can, you know, hit hard if he needs to. He can use this, which is okay. His other abilities are not great. They don't scale super great. This actually does scale really well. Cure Wave, but it's still fairly expensive. Like at that point, like if you're bringing Frog and Robo in order to do that, you're probably better off just having Marl and Robo, you know? The only reason you do that is to have more physical damage. But if you really want physical damage with Frog, you're way better off teaming him up with Ayla because, you know, they have like that drop down slash drop kick, otherwise known as drop down. That ability, I remember the name. That ability hits really, really hard, and then meanwhile they can switch to Slurp Kiss, which heals amazingly, and it's just it scales even better. And you give her just a little bit of magic tabs, and then boom, it's super awesome. Like you don't need to be feeding a whole bunch of magic tabs to him because you can just do it with Ayla instead. And then you also like I don't know, it's just good. This scales because this ability scales only with her magic stat. It doesn't have anything to do with Frog's at all. And it's just a really good tech. It's like, wait, you know, look at this. Like, it's so much cheaper. And already, like, even, like, look at this. With no difference, nothing changed at all, just base stats. Like, it costs 2, this costs 8. And it heals for, well, actually it does heal for more, but it's way less efficient. I was about to say, I thought for a second my eyes were glazing over and I thought it was the other way around. And I was like, it heals for more. And it costs, like, way less. But I was wrong. But anyways, yes, I feel like Frog is a really good mid-game healer. Late game, I don't think that he's good healing in and of himself. He's good when combined with other characters. He has a lot of really good synergistic dual techs, is kind of the thing that's nice about Frog, as far as healing perspective. Now, Robo I would say is overall a really good healer. He's a good solid healer just by himself. If you can get him maxed out, like, I don't know, it gets gross, where at max level, he can heal the whole party if he's using Heal Beam every turn by himself. You just destroy everything. You can't die. It doesn't matter. If you have status immunity and he's just using Heal Beam every single turn, you can't die. It's not possible. Like, you just have, then somebody else can feed him an elixir or an ether or whatever every once in a while, and you just win. It's so crazy. So Robo is a pretty sweet healer later on because you don't even have to use dual techs. Then meanwhile, so if he's just healing all day long, then somebody else you can have whatever 2 characters you want. It doesn't matter. You pick 2 characters that have a really good dual tech against that particular boss, and they're just like boom, 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 boom all day long, and then Robo's doing this, and then meanwhile, like in between that, he switches to just using rapid fire punch with the crisis arm, and he just destroys everything. He's doing like 3,000 plus damage, like, or whatever, 5,000 or something stupid like that. You have him teamed up with Ayla, and they can use Beast Toss occasionally. So he's using Heal Beam, and then he alternates between doing that and Beast Toss with her, and just, man, he's doing like 6,000 or 8,000 damage to people all the time. And then he crits occasionally, and he gets 9,999 with his later way endgame too. I don't know, it's just dumb. Robo is a really good healer endgame. So very, very late game, Robo's an absolute powerhouse. Mid game and stuff, he's kind of expensive, but he can potentially be good. Putting magic tabs in Robo's way more beneficial because his multipliers are so high. Then lastly, Ayla, as far as a healer. Ayla's a really good healer. One of the things, I think I talked about this earlier already, is that her Kiss ability removes negative status effects, so you can use her to remove negative status effects instead of just using a Panacea / heal, or having to worry about status immunity items. I feel like status immunity items like the Vigilant Helm is just better, or the Angel's Tiara is just better overall, but still really good. But Slurp Kiss is it's one of the best. Yeah, until you get Robo super, super maxed out and you give him tons and tons of magic tabs, Slurp Kiss is like amazing. Slurp Kiss is like mid to late game is amazing. The best healing in the game, I would say, overall. But then after that, Robo can just pull ahead just by himself. So, who is the best healer overall? I would say single target is going to be Marl. For, like, as far as who's the most synergistic, I would say Frog is the best, I guess, kind of. But that's late game, he falls away, like, hardcore, really, really bad. And then Robo's definitely the best, like, overall healer by far. His mana efficiency is decent. But once his stats get maxed out, he gets really, really powerful. And then Ayla overall is just really, really good, especially if you want a bunch of physical damage. Yeah, both Robo and Ayla can get really, really just intense towards the end. The amount of damage they can throw out and the amount of healing they can do is really, really crazy. 67, there you go. Boom. Oh yeah, 667, that's what I was trying to do. So anyways, they're all good. Alright, so that all being said, who do I recommend you throw your magic capsules / magic tabs on? And that really depends on what you want to do. I feel like Marl, it will boost her cure especially and take it over the edge, and it makes her aura a little bit nicer early game, but other than that, it doesn't really matter too much. Like, Marl scales nicely with magic early on. She's all like, yeah, early game, and then mid game it's kind of like so-so. Late game it's like crashes hard, and it's just not any good. Like, for example, you know, one of the problems with Marl is, like, she's got a lot of dual techs that are pretty nice, but she doesn't scale well with them. They're okay. Like, for example, Antipode Bomb 3, really good ability. Most of the damage comes from... the MP cost, by the way, tells you roughly how much that character contributes to that particular skill. So, this ability, a majority of the damage comes from Luca. Okay, so it costs 20, and then meanwhile, a very small percentage of the damage comes from Marl. So let's just say it's 35% of the damage or 40% of the damage comes from Marl, right? Okay, so if you throw a bunch of magic tabs on Marl, like, yeah, it'll make her healing a little bit nicer, but then, like, the amount of damage boost you're getting out of it isn't very much. Meanwhile, like, in giving a whole bunch of magic to, like, Ayla, will then make it so that abilities like Inferno, which is 24.7 times her magic stat, as opposed to, like, 5 times Marl's magic stat for this one, or whatever it is. You know, see what I mean? Like, you're just throwing the same amount of magic tabs, however many you're going to throw on Marl, you throw them on Ayla instead. It makes her healing really good, but it also makes her damage really, really good. So Ayla just gets so much more benefit out of it compared to Marl that it's more beneficial to put it on Ayla. Also, like, Ayla starts out with really low magic stat. This is kind of what they do, is all the characters that have really low stat, typically they get more benefit from it. The only exception to that is, like, Marl and Luca with their power stat. You don't put any power stat strength on them because they don't get any benefit. That's the one skill that's, like, completely... the one stat that means nothing in the entire game for them. Anyways, so let's see. I wouldn't really recommend putting it on Marl. If you want to put some early game, I think it's kind of nice. But after that, it's not worth it. For Frog is a good mid-game healer. I feel like later on, he just kind of tapers off. A lot of his magic damage is just bad. It doesn't scale well. It has really low multipliers, so a lot of his water abilities are terrible. He's way better. He's more suited to physical damage. And actually, his strength/power stat is pretty low, so putting strength tabs on him is really good. Putting magic tabs on him doesn't really get you much benefit. I don't really feel like it's worth it at all. Nothing really scales with him super well. Like, his Cure Wave scales pretty well, and so does his Cure 2, kind of, but he starts out so low. You have to put so many on him just to even start seeing the benefit of it. And that's just to make him comparable to Marl. You know what I mean? It's just not worth it. So I would highly recommend you don't put any on Frog. As far as, from a healing perspective, as far as the other characters, Robo scales really, really well. If you can give him a whole bunch of them, especially endgame, he just destroys. He can heal everything he can accomplish everything that everybody else is doing with dual techs. He can do that by himself. From an attack perspective, too, it increases laser spin, which is blah. But otherwise, his electrocute/shock ability makes it pretty decent, actually. He can kind of mow things over with that. So if you give him, like, the Crisis Arm, and he's just doing, like, really good physical damage, and then whenever there's more than one target, he's just, like, electrocute. You give him, like, a Gold Stud, and he's just, like, I don't know. He just destroys everything. It's really good. So Robo gets really good benefit from it. Ayla, as I was explaining earlier, she gets really good healing and stuff from all these. In fact, actually, at 35, Slurp Kiss completely heals the whole party. Which, that's 20 magic tabs. Which, that's not... I mean, that is kind of rough. I mean, but at the same time, it doesn't take that long to farm for that, so at the end of the game. So you could get to the point where you're doing a dual tech anyways, it's really good. And as I mentioned before, Kiss is a pretty good single target. It takes a little while to get to the point where it can full heal everybody, but it does eventually get there. I think it's at 67? That's what I was saying earlier? Yeah. So yeah, I would say if you're going to throw some on some characters to boost them, you can boost a little bit for Marl to boost you early game. Frog is not worth it. Just a lot of his techs are just bad with magic stat. They don't scale well at all, so I wouldn't bother with that. You can, but it's kind of meh. I would more so, what I like to do with Frog is just give him a slight boost, just temporarily, by giving him the Magic Ring and the Rune Blade. Because that's a really easy way to just hang on to the Rune Blade and don't sell it, because then I can just boost his magic temporarily to make him a little bit better healer for particular fights. More so, I typically do that because I want to use some of his dual techs, because he can use some really hard-hitting physical techs, like with Ayla, for example, and then he can also use Slurp Kiss. So I don't know. Yeah, you can use heal and then just use Slurp Kiss when things get a little bit nastier. Is kind of more like how I look at that. But then otherwise, I'm using his mana all for physical damage, is more what Frog should be focusing on. So going back to talking about damage abilities, something to keep in mind with all these things is this whole chart is not taking into account all the stats and all the variables, because this is just somebody's, like, generic numbers with no capsules or tabs put on anybody, and just, like, the typical weapons you're going to have at that point when you're in the Black Omen. That's what this is showing, is like endgame damage-ish. However, there's a lot of variance there, because it's actually kind of a complicated formula for a lot of this. And remember what I was saying before, that, like, the techs are you know, half the damage comes from one character, half the damage comes from another character. Usually that's what a dual tech is. So the damage can vary a lot. If you put, you know, a lot of strength on one character, it will boost the damage of the dual tech, but it's not like, it's not as cut and dry as, it's not as simple as like the healing. You know, the healing was all based off of one person's stat, but there's a lot of variables that go into the formula for these particular things. Like, for example, you know, like the attack stat on each character is, you know, for the guys, is power slash strength times a number, and then weapon damage times a number. So that's what equals your attack stat. And a great example of this in practice is Robo, because some of his abilities scale with just his power slash strength stat, like Robo Tackle, and other ones scale with his attack damage. So his attack stat, which is again weapon plus strength-ish, it's more complicated than that, will end up equaling that. So I could figure that out in here and then like plug it into the formula and stuff like that, and then so I can actually get some real numbers to figure out exactly what these would be. And then I could edit just that number, just like I was doing with the healing over here, where I can edit the magic and poof, it changes it. The problem is, it's not as cut and dry as this. It's way more complicated, there's way more steps, and it's different. Not only is it different characters for each stat, but which stat affects that particular ability is different for different characters. So like, I could break it all down, I could figure it all out, but that would be a lot of work, and I don't think it would really help that much. But anyways, the reason I'm pointing all that out is just to explain that I don't really have a good way of showing you how the abilities would be affected by throwing a bunch of strength and capsules and stuff like that. Now, as far as what to tell you, so that all being said, what I'm leading up to saying is, who is the best characters to be tossing all your strength and magic tabs onto? I don't really have a good way of showing you, like, these abilities are awesome if you do that, and this is why you should do it. I don't really have a good way of just summarizing that for you or just giving you a bullet point list, but I can tell you a couple different things. Like, for example, you know, one thing to keep in mind as far as just a general principle is, like, Luca, for example, majority of her damage comes from this skill comes from Luca, but she's the one who maxes out her magic stat first. Once you start leveling up to the point where she and Magus max out their magic stat. As far as remaining characters you want to toss magic on, like, I think overall that Ayla and Robo get the best benefit for healing for sure. But as far as from a pure damage perspective, Ayla gets really good for Inferno, really good, and also, like, as far as other characters, I would say Chrono is pretty good because Luminaire scales really well. He'll do something, in the end, he does something like 15% more damage than Magus doing Dark Matter, eventually. Initially he doesn't because Magus just has such higher magic step. Once Chrono finally gets a bunch of magic, then it catches up, and then Chrono can just wipe out everything by himself, which is really crazy. Also, something else to keep in mind, when you're doing stuff like this, when you're using skills where it's really lopsided towards one person, like this one with Antipode Bomb 3 with Luca, how she has more magic cost, and same thing here, Final Kick with her, or Twister with her, or you know, some of these other abilities, like here's a great example, 3D attack. 20 damage, 20 MP cost with Ayla, and it hits really, really hard. So, judging by this MP cost, a majority of the damage comes from Ayla, right? So that would mean, like, putting a bunch of strength slash power items on her would be really good. However, she maxes out her power stat pretty fast, so what you can do to boost that damage is actually, the best thing to boost is actually to give her the Prismatic Spectacles, because it boosts her damage by 50%. But because she's doing a majority of the damage for that particular ability, that means you can toss this way over the edge and make it really, really strong. So that's an example of, like, you know what I mean? Like, other skills would get benefit from it, but if she's only part of it, you know, like this one, I bet you it doesn't increase it anywhere near as much as it does for this one. She's going to get way more benefit out of this one, and it does more damage anyway. Twister hits everything on the screen, 3D attack is a single target, but that's an example of, like, you just kind of got to look at it. So I'm not really sure what to tell you as far as specific advice. There's a lot of abilities you can use, but I would just recommend you look over my charts. So I'm going to, again, scroll up to the top. I'll let you pause the video for a bit if you want to look over these numbers. Scroll down so you can see down here, and then you can pause the video and look at all these again. But yeah, I would say, like, try to boost the characters that have the max. However, in a lot of these situations like this one, it's definitely based off of Magus's magic damage, for example. So other characters you could boost, she's already going to be maxed out really fast, so, like, you could boost Marl's magic to boost the damage of this skill, but again, I don't really feel like she benefits. Yeah, I don't think she provides as much benefit as you'd think. So it increases the damage, but not by that much. You're way better off putting, like, the Prismatic Spectacles on Magus, for example, is going to be the easiest way to boost that end game. So those kind of things. If you can get multiple Prismatic Spectacles in the Arena of Ages, that can make your abilities really, really dumb. Alright, so that all being said, who are the characters I recommend you throw all of your capsules on for either, you know, early game or late game, both for strength and magic in particular? Now, so what I would say is for strength, Strength increases your physical damage and the damage of all your physical techs. So Robo is the one who has the highest strength, and he's actually going to max out first, so he's going to cap out. I don't really think it's super worth putting it on him. The character who scales with strength the best is definitely Ayla. She has much higher multipliers with a lot of her techs, so she gets a lot more benefit out of it than any other character. Her strength is pretty high, though, so she will max out eventually as well. You know, Magus, you can put some on him, but all that increases is his regular tech. He has no physical techs at all, so he gets no benefit from that for most of the time you're using him. Like, Magus is a straight up spellcaster. There's no reason to be increasing his strength, so I wouldn't even bother with that. I would ignore him entirely for that. So that being said, between these three characters, Ayla's going to get the biggest benefit, but otherwise Chrono gets a lot of benefit from it too. Frog like needs it the most. He has the lowest, and he like gets it the slowest, so he's going to need it a lot more to get him up to par. However, a lot of his abilities are like, you know, like even Dropkick, for example. Like, see, Ayla just does a higher percentage of that damage, and then Frog does such a smaller percentage because his multiplier is so low. And that's true for most of his abilities. So, like, it's kind of like his auto attack hits pretty hard, but a lot of his physical techs, he doesn't really get as much benefit from it. So, like even that, you're looking at that and saying, well, it's kind of the same principle I was talking about earlier, where different characters benefit from an ability more. Like, even let's look at that, Dropkick. Dropkick, so a higher percentage. Look at that. So she has a higher multiplier, and it doesn't cost him anywhere near as much. But so the majority of that damage comes from her, anyways. It makes more sense to be putting that on her. Well, actually, you just saw it. We saw the formula. Whoops. So, yeah. Anyways, yeah, you're better off throwing them on her. So, so strength, I would say Ayla is overall the most beneficial, and then otherwise I'd probably just evenly distribute it here. Chrono gets more benefit overall, I would say, like for his single techs. In fact, we can even look at that. What is Frog's single techs for his multiplier on these guys for leap slash? 2 times 2 damage. Is damage the same thing as attack? I'm actually not sure what that even means. And then meanwhile, Chrono, his... I guess damage is probably calculated to what a regular attack would be. Like a regular melee attack. That's interesting. Wait a second. Does, can this crit then if it's based off of his regular attack? I don't think so. That'd be interesting if it could, though. Because if you had the Masamune and you wore the hero's badge, would that mean that that ability becomes really good the more power he has? I don't know. Whatever. I'm musing. That's starting to get real deep. But that's what I was talking about, though. The formulas for these things can get real complicated real fast for the damage ones. So anyways, yes, I would say Ayla's the best benefit, then Chrono and Frog. Now, next, for Magic. You know, the thing about Magic is Magus is going to max out by himself. Don't bother putting any on Magic. Like, yeah, he's good with it, but it's not worth it. Now, Luca has the next most Magic. Oops, I was looking at hit. Magic. Yeah, Magus has the most. Luca has the next most, and she's got really good abilities. She scales really well with it. However, she's going to max out pretty fast, too, so I don't really think it's super worth putting it on her, because she's going to max out anyways. Other characters. The characters, I feel like they get the... You know, Marl, she scales, like, okay, but she's just such a small percentage of most dual techs anyways, that her damage doesn't really come from that. Like, even Ice Cube Toss, for example. I think it's just called Cube Toss in the old one. Yeah, Cube Toss. So look at this. It's Ayla's attack, which is her physical damage based on her strength / power, and then meanwhile, Marl's magic times 7.5. So, see what I mean? Like, you're better off putting power items on Ayla temporarily, or putting like this prismatic spectacles on her for this ability. Meanwhile, putting a whole bunch of magic on Marl doesn't really increase the damage that much. Meanwhile, a lot of other abilities like this. I think this one's actually a combination. Well, actually, wait, this one's a combination of both of them. It calculates it first, and then it does that. So this one, actually, Antipode Bomb 3 might be good to put a bunch of magic on Marl. So this might actually be an exception to what I was saying earlier. But yeah, see, it's just on a case-by-case basis. The formulas for these is all really weird. They're all over the place. So anyways, yeah, as far as Marl, like, I don't think it's super worth it to put on her. It increases her healing, but the other characters get so much more benefit out of it. I think that Ayla and Robo scale with their magic stat way better, so you're going to get a lot of benefit out of it. Chrono, the only thing that it really matters with him is it increases his Star Lightning, Lightning 2, which are both kind of garbage abilities towards the end of the game, and then Luminaire. Luminaire is great, and it is actually better than Magus's Dark Matter by far. However, it's kind of like after Chrono's maxed. So like, if you're using Luminaire a lot, then sure, put magic on Chrono. If you're not using him for that, then don't even bother. It's not worth it. I would say, like, definitely, you know, Ayla and Robo get the most benefit. Frog gets some benefit of it, but it's kind of... I don't know. kind of a toss-up between these two. I would say overall I feel like Marl is the most useful. So that being said, who would I put magic on? I'd recommend Ayla and Robo, followed by like Chrono and Marl, and then finally Frog in the last. And then don't even bother with these two. These two aren't worth it. So I started out this whole video, started this research, trying to figure out definitively who is the best character for different situations, who does the most damage and stuff. I discovered that they were kind of unbalanced, but in a good way. Some of the attacks just are bad. I listed all the good ones and stuff, and you can look back over that list later, but generally speaking, all the characters are good in different situations. So I kind of feel like all this research it's interesting, but I kind of feel like in some ways it doesn't really matter anymore. I did all this work though, I don't want it all to go to waste. But yeah, I've been intrigued with this though, because what I found in the end was I felt like all of the characters are good in different situations. So there's times when they're worthwhile. So I want all of them. I found a use for every single character when all was said and done. So I don't know. But yeah, I hope you guys found this interesting and helpful, but that concludes my my spicy, nerdy spreadsheet. Hope you all found that helpful. So if you enjoyed this, then throw a like on it, subscribe, stay tuned for more content just like this. As always, you guys stay awesome, have an amazing day, and I'll see you next time.